I turned it around.
would like to explain to you the protocol for this meeting. Protocols are fairly simple. We will have a civil discussion tonight. We will not have any kissing, haranguing, or anything that you can do that is inappropriate and not necessary. Okay? We are here because this is a very important discussion on a matter which is near and dear to all of us, those of us in the community and those of us who work in the community. So the presentation will be heard in its entirety, and there will be no questions during these presentations. After that, the questions obviously will be allowed. First, the CAC will ask their questions, CAC members who are sitting up here and some are in the back. Then after that, the public can ask their questions. Everyone who wants to speak will certainly have an opportunity to speak. Okay? We are asking you will have 2 minutes to speak. You are going to be asked to fill in a speaker's card so that I do not have to try to remember whose hand went up and try to coordinate all of you, okay? So Elise has the speaker's card. Elise, how many of you would like to speak on this subject? If you would kindly raise your hands, that would be wonderful. Okay, so Elise, would you go around and distribute those speaker's cards now?
There are also some in the back as well.
Elise will bring the cards up to me. I have one card already.
Will you be using the microphone at all?
No, can't you hear me?
No,
Not really.
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, so, like, did you hear anything that I said?
Pieces, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this is for you. We don't have a microphone set up, but I will raise my voice.
Thank you.
If you can't hear me, just raise your hand and I'll speak louder or come closer to you. Okay, so did everyone hear about the public having opportunities to speak? And that you fill in one of those yellow cards, give it back to Elise after you finish filling it in, and then I will call
Can I have
your
Elise?
name according to
Can I have one?
the cards that I have available from you, okay?
Oh, yes, I do.
Can I have one more?
So, as I indicated, you will have 2 minutes to speak. And as you see to my right is a timer, so that you'll have your 2 minutes. After you speak for 2 minutes, then you will be asked to sit down, so we can get to the next presenter, okay, or next speaker. That pretty much is it. The process is simple, and we want you to comply with the process, okay? I don't expect to see anyone acting out, okay? You don't bring my school teacher, educational administrator, and make me wear that hat, okay? Because this is important business, and we're just glad that you're here, because we want you to get these facts. All right, so, Mrs. Sakin, would you kindly call the roll?
Yes. Senator Gomez is absent. Dr. Bertha
Here.
Ali Nixon.
Yes.
Deidre Smith. You do have a quorum. I'd also like to note that Pastor Bell, Neola James, Joyce Armstrong are also in attendance from this evening.
Thank you very much. All right, so, members, would you kindly take a look at the agenda, and when you have reviewed it, I need a motion and a second to approve it.
Chair,
Yes.
I would move that we approve the agenda. September 24th.
Thank you very much.
How are you?
Discuss it? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Okay, very good. So would you take a few minutes to look at the minutes of August 27th?
I just wanted, there are 3 chairs up here in front for folks who can't hear or having a problem hearing. If you'd like to move up front, these 3.
Thank you very much, Michael. When you're ready, take a motion.
Should I go? No.
said, yes, Ms. Green, for the record, I move that we approve the agenda for August 27th, and the executive. Thank you, Dr. Bell. Discussion, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Okay, very good. So, Mrs. King, any announcements, please?
There are no announcements with that.
All right, CAC members, do you have announcements today? Okay. So then we'll move into the business of this evening, and that is a presentation by Dr. Mark Starr from the California Department of Public Health, otherwise known as CDPH, an update on the 100-point shipyard Parcel A1 radiological survey. Mr. Starr?
Well, I'm not Dr. Starr,
No, we can tell that.
but I will fill in. Should I stand here? Is this the best place?
Well, you'll be in front of this. Do you have any?
Excuse me.
I'm just going to do an introductory statement,
Okay.
and then I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues, and then I'll sit down. So I will not be walking
All right, well,
the
we're glad to see
PowerPoint
you.
presentation.
Glad to see you.
All right. Good evening. So I am not Dr. Starr. Dr. Starr sends his regrets. He is out of the office this week. My name is Maureen Klein. I'm the Assistant Deputy Director for the Center for Environmental Health and the California Department of Public Health. And we want to thank you for providing us this opportunity to provide background information regarding Hunters Point and to update all of you on our health and safety scan for Parcel A1. Can everybody hear me in the back? So my colleagues today, louder? Okay. My colleagues today, Anthony Chu and Gonzalo Perez, they will provide a more detailed presentation regarding activities in Parcel A1 and findings today. So before I turn it over to them, I would like to just do a quick summary of our health and safety scan findings of Parcel A1. So in total, the Parcel A1 project is over 90% complete. And to date, we have found 37 anomalies, which include 36 naturally occurring instances of potassium-40, and then of course, most recently, a naval deck marker about 1.5 inches in diameter and containing radium. There are no identified health impacts associated with this finding. This deck marker did not pose a health risk to current homeowners or the public. The deck marker has been removed and the soil surrounding the area has been scanned, and there was no residual radiation found on the soil. Regarding work still left to do at Parcel A1, the final outdoor areas are being scanned, and then also testing of household dust. So our scientists are working on a protocol to dust samples with homeowners, and those are for homeowners who are interested, and we are working with the Homeowners Association to get those scheduled. We are confident that our health and safety scanning protocol is most effective approach and method for detecting discrete radiation sources. The California Department of Public Health is confident that upon final completion of the scanning and the analysis of the data, we will have information to determine if there are any significant risks to the residents or to the public's health. I would like to now to turn it over to Mr. Perez, who will provide a presentation that will in more detail describe the health and safety scan and the findings today. Thank you.
So, Council, thank you so much for inviting us. Anytime we have an opportunity to share some of our learnings and discoveries and knowledge, we're happy to do that. My name is Gonzalo Perez. I'm the branch chief for the Radiologic Health Branch within the Department of Public Health. And if someone's heard some of the familiar faces, you've heard me say this before, but I always like to give a little bit of an introduction on who we are and what the Radiologic Health Branch is charged to do. I don't know how many people here have ever heard of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. That's the federal agency that oversees nuclear power plants and federal facilities. Many, many years ago, almost 60 years ago, the federal government passed a law where states were able to become their own little nuclear regulatory commission. That's called an agreement state. So in 1962, Governor Pat Brown signed the law where California became its own nuclear regulatory commission, and that's what we're called is the Radiologic Health Branch. Our charge is to oversee all licensing and X-ray and accelerator machine operations within the state. So since 1962, our program has been evolving and growing. We've got about 92 health physicists in the program, ranging from folks with 35, 40 years of health physics experience, all the way down to about 2 years. And we put all of our health physicists through intense training on how to use survey instruments, how to do calculations in health physics, how to protect themselves, the public, and to inspect and license facilities, registrants like your your dental office, your medical office, or any radioactive materials licensee. And by the way, we have a little over 1,700 radioactive materials licensees in the state, using radiation all the way from medical treatments and diagnosis up to large-scale industrial applications, very, very large sources. Our inspectors go out and inspect, and our licensed reviewers license and make sure their engineering controls are in place. So that's a little bit of background on what the Radiologic Health Branch charge is. We were asked back in, I think it all started in May, if the CDPH could come out and do a survey here at Parcel A, A1, and the RHB was happy to comply. Our charge is one of trying to get as close to the citizens and protect the citizens as much as possible from unnecessary radiation. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and start. Now, everyone see the screen? Can everybody hear me? Am I talking loud enough? I'm kind of a loud mouth sometimes. So. Okay. So some of this you guys probably already know. The parcel was transferred to the San Francisco Redevelopment Agency in 2004, and construction began in 2012, and residents started moving in 2014. So we were asked to perform a health and safety survey of Parcel 1, and I'll speak to the objective in a minute. We pride ourselves in being independent and having the expertise. This is something that we pride ourselves at all times when we go out and inspect facilities and relicense facilities. We're trying to license and oversee and inspect sites to the best of our abilities, all to the regulatory requirements. In terms of the objective, one thing I want to start off by saying is that as health physicists, there's a whole industry out there in the world of health physics. And one of the first things you learn as a health physicist when you go through training, university training, and then when you come out in the practical world, is you are taught that when you have a survey instrument in your hand, you have an expectation that you're going to find radioactive material or some extraneous source of radiation. That's the training you get. So if you were going to ask me to survey this room, I'm going to walk into this room with the instruments that I feel are necessary to find that one little atom over there in the corner. That's my job. And that's the approach that my staff takes and all of us takes. So that's something we really pride ourselves in. Purpose and goals. Okay, so we wanted to perform a survey to address the health and safety for the public and the residents that live here. And we wrote a plan, and it was focusing just on the publicly accessible areas, the uncovered ground, and the hardscape areas. The goal was to survey all the accessible areas that were safe for our staff to go to. You probably can see there are some embankments here and some rocky areas that it's just not safe or feasible for a human being to walk level without falling over or maybe tripping into a hole or breaking their leg or something. Our goal was to try to find any extraneous source that might be out there in the parcel. And if we do see some sort of anomaly, we're going to investigate it. And those were the goals and objectives of this survey. So, don't know if everybody can see this slide. This is what we call our towed array detector system. So we've used at least 4 different kinds of instruments out here, and this is the first one. We attach, and I may have another photo, but down here at the bottom, you're going to see these big rectangular boxes that actually are about that long, and they're connected in parallel to this tow, this trailer. And this Kawasaki 4-wheeler drives very, very slow. And the streets and the parks, we did the parks with this towed array. Now, those detectors are what we call large volume detectors. They're very large, and maybe the chambers inside are probably about that long, and they're probably about that big around. And they're big, high-purity germanium detectors. They're crystals. And so if any kind of gamma photon hits that crystal, it causes a light. That light is converted to current. And that current is put into another instrument that gives a printout or a signature of what that data shows. So we get 1 data point per second on these series of these 2 large volume detectors. It's a lot of data, tens of thousands, it's probably in the billions of data points that we will collect with the towed array system. This is another picture. It's a little bit cleaner. You can see the detectors down here. This is the front end, and it's connected to our computer system. And this is during a calibration check where we literally put like a cesium source on the bottom of the detector, and then we let the detectors run and operate for about 30 minutes. And they collect data, and we're just doing a quality assurance check on the detectors as well as the computer system to make sure that the data is being collected correctly. These are 2 more instruments that we've been using here at the site. Our workhorse, one of our workhorse instruments, is this one on the right. It's a handheld detector. It's called a Ludlam Model 19. And this detector is very sensitive. It has a small crystal, sodium iodide crystal, inside that box. You can see a little dimple here on the side, and that's where that crystal is located, right in the center of the box. And it works the same way. If a gamma photon goes through that crystal, it creates a light, which is converted to current, and it gets into another little instrument, and then it will read out in micro-R per hour. I don't want to get too technical, but we talk about millirems and microrems. There's 1,000 microrems in a millirem, so it's a very, very small number. And that's how we're collecting our background. We get background numbers from this instrument. So that's one instrument we use. I'm going to get into a little bit more detail about our process when we are actually doing the walkover survey, but real quickly, another system we use, this is called the Spectra 1000. We have several of these in the branch. The purpose of this instrument is, I don't know how many people are aware, but every gamma radionuclide has a fingerprint. It's its own unique fingerprint. And so what this instrument does is it literally takes a snapshot of the energy that's being emanated from that radionuclide source, and it's plotting a fingerprint. And so when you look at that plot, you can actually tell, this instrument has a library in it. It'll actually tell you what radioisotope you're looking at. So this is a very valuable instrument. And by the way, just so you know, we have a lot of landfill alarms around the state where a garbage truck will drive through a landfill and set off the detectors. And we are called out to that site to make sure it's not something dangerous in there. And we use it all the time to find out, and usually it's always medical waste, where it's patient diapers or something like that. So this instrument is very commonly used in the industry and is very valuable and practical for us to use. So the teams of health physicists, we have teams of 2 people. We have we have 2 health physicists. One is swinging the meter, we like to call it, using the survey instrument, that Model 19, or another instrument called Ludlam 4410, which is a long silver tube. You guys may have seen those, people walking around with those. And they're slowly, methodically walking over the pathways, trying to find something in a trigger limit that we've set above background. And then the other individual is a data recorder. Not only are we doing system checks, morning, noon, and night, and documenting that on the spreadsheet, we're also writing down all the numbers that we're finding. Every 50 feet or so, we're dropping our silver tube, our 4410, and taking a 1 minute reading and documenting those counts. If an employee does find some sort of anomaly above our threshold, they call the lead technician, and the lead technician comes out with that Inspector 1000, drops the 1000 right on top of the spot where they think they found an anomaly, and lets it sit there for 30 minutes. And it's gathering all the data, all the little photons, the gamma photons, and it's trying to figure out what it is. At the end of 30 minutes, it gives you a plot, and it tells you what the isotopes are that you saw. And I think Marin mentioned that we had 37 anomalies so far, 36 of which were potassium-40. So I'll get into a little bit more about potassium-40 in a minute. So sources other than naturally occurring radioactive material, we notify and coordinate with the Navy. So what does that mean? Naturally occurring radioactive material, I'm sure everybody knows. We live in a radioactive world. The planet was formed 4.5 billion years ago. And like it or not, there are primordial elements, uranium and thorium. There's 2 strands of uranium and one of thorium and one of uranium. They have decay. They decay. They're unstable. And as they decay, they create other radioactive isotopes. One of those is radium. So the average person, and many studies have been done over many decades, all of us, on average, receive between 3 and 310 milligrams per year from the sun, from radon that's emanating from granite, or these primordial elements, the thoriums and their decay, their daughters, the decay chains. And so we just naturally receive that. We also have natural potassium-40 in our bodies. So we're actually little radioactive sources. So that's what norm is. It's naturally occurring. So as we find anomalies and we put the Inspector 1000 on it, we're able to get a signature to decide, is that natural or is that some sort of man-made something? And we found 36 natural anomalies. And then we'll get into the other anomaly here in a few minutes. But if we do find an anomaly that's man-made, we do coordinate with the Navy. So what do? We secure the location. We implement our notification plan, which is a lot of internal CDPH notifications, but then we coordinate with the Navy, and they assist with notifying the city, and also we will communicate and notify the homeowners. I hope many people have gone onto our website and seen our updates. I think there are 8 updates so far on the website, and you can go back to our website and review those if you wish. And then once all the notifications are made and the right people are gathered, we begin the remediation effort. The Navy staff do that because it's their source, and we observe. So, the survey area, like I mentioned before, the original effort was to do all the accessible areas outdoor. And then we had a meeting with the residents, the HOA, on July 5th. And it was a really good meeting because we learned more about the site. You can only do so much from Google Maps, right? And you can read some reports, but until you actually see the site and hear from the people that live here, you don't have a full sense of what all the areas are. And they told us, and we agreed wholeheartedly, and we were happy to do it, that we expanded our original plan to do all the common areas. We didn't realize that there were these backyards and these common areas. there's something they call the tiered common and private areas. There are gates and locks, and we had to have access to get in there, but we expanded to that area as well. There are, and I'm sure many of you know, there are slopes and banks, embankments around the perimeter of the site. I mean, well, there's one right there, you can see. And some are steeper than others. And at first we thought we weren't going to be able to do any of those steep slopes. But it turns out that we were able to do a great deal of those steep slopes. So we included that. Also, we learned that there was a stockpile of soil on the outside boundary here. And we included that stockpile soil. We surveyed the top of it and as much as we could around the side. And finally, we also expanded to do residential dust surveys. And there's an artist community, and we're going to do the artist community as well. Anybody that wants that done. So that's quite an expansion. There we go. So here's a map of the site. And I can pass this around so you can see it a little bit better. So if you want to take it, pass it around. This is this map shows all the completed areas that we've done of the site, whether it's towed array or walkover with health physics teams. The green shows everything that's been completed. That was as of a week ago, last Friday. We don't have an updated map since then, but we have some good news. Pretend this area is outlined in blue. Pretend it's green, because we finished that last week. About mid last week, we finished this area. We also finished right over here in the artist community area. We can't get to all of it because there's these big piles of dirt and big giant holes in the ground. But we did finish this. So everything is green. Pretend everything is green except for, and you can tell, these two different shades. So this darker shade that you see in these areas, we are not going to be able to survey those areas because it's too unsafe. It's not accessible to our staff. It's too hazardous for our staff. So we are not going to, it's permanently inaccessible, we've labeled it. However, these orangey kind of areas that you see are the tan areas. Condominiums are being built here along Kirkwood, over here. And then this laydown area where you'll see a lot of wood and concrete and materials being stacked up. Those are temporarily inaccessible. And we thought that they were going to be inaccessible for quite some time. In fact, we were estimating next spring before we could come out and do that. Well, in the middle of last week, we actually finished everything thinking that we couldn't do the temporarily inaccessible. And it turns out that the developer is able to begin opening up these parcels. So we got staff to show up this week. They came in early this morning. One gentleman had a 4-hour drive from Sacramento. And they're starting this yellow area. So because the temporarily inaccessible is becoming accessible, we are not done. We thought we were done last week until next spring, but that's not the case. So as the developer opens up these sites, we will start doing those inaccessible areas. I think one of the things that I think I mentioned earlier, the RHB, we love to come out and talk to the community when it's necessary, when people ask us. And we've been to 4 HOA meetings, getting to know some folks by their first names. And so we feel like we've communicated very well with the community. We posted a work plan, and we do FAQs on our website. We've established an email, a permanent email address for Hunters Point that's on our website, and you can send a question there anytime you wish. We get weekly progress updates. I think we've issued 8 so far. And we did have an information table out here 5 days a week, starting around noon on a Monday and then ending around noon on a Friday. And as time went on and less residents were stopping by, we kind of scaled that back to 1 day a week. So that's the communication we've done with the community. And findings, so we can get back to this now. So 37 anomalies have been found to date, and 36 were the naturally occurring potassium-40. One deck marker that contained radium was found down the street here. So it's west of the Department of Public Works training, bottom of hill, in an undeveloped area behind a fence below approximately 10 inches of soil, and that's an approximation. On September 11th, the Navy removed it. CDPH staff, I think even the city was there, observed the remediation of the source. It's about 1.5 inches in diameter, and the bit of dirt that was dug out, it was laid on a plastic sheet, and it was carefully surveyed. We actually have a videotape of it. And the hole was surveyed. No residual radium was found in the soil or the hole, so they filled the hole back up. So what was the finding of the source? What was this thing? Well, they call it a deck marker, and you heard me mention that workhorse instrument of ours, a level of 19, that can measure in micro-R per hour. So that source was found, taken off the shovel and laid on the plastic sheet, and the Navy measured it, and then two of my staff from health physics staff measured it as well. And it came out, the naked source, I like to use that term, the naked source was 3.4 millirem per hour right on contact. And I forgot to mention, before we dug it up, it was 0.09 millirem per hour right at the top of the dirt. So very, very low reading at the top of the dirt. We determined there's really no health issues with that source the way it was in situ. That 0.09 millirem per hour, you'd have to sit on it for 24 hours a day, 365 days to start getting some kind of whole body dose from it. And one of the things that we like to do, and some people misconstrue this, is that we want to give you some context of radiation, because a lot of people aren't familiar with it. And so we're just trying to give you everyday context of what radiation is and how it affects your body, or how much your body is receiving. So that was 3.4 millirem on contact of the source. So I guess if you sat on it for an hour, you would get 3.4 millirem. And for context, if you flew from Los Angeles to New York City, you get about 3.5 millirem in that entire flight. Another example is a dental x-ray. On average, a dental x-ray is 1.5 millirem per hour, instantaneous exposure. So you'd have to sit on that spot at 0.09 millirem when it was buried almost 17 hours, a little over 16 hours. And I don't know who would be sitting on that spot, but that's what you would have to do in order to get an equivalent dental x-ray. So the survey progress, we did begin surveying Parcel A1 on Monday, July 16th. It started off with a whole lot of training for the staff. It was right here in this room. And they trained for 4 hours to learn how to do the paperwork correctly, how to be consistent with using the survey instruments, and how to communicate with each other while they were out on a parcel. This is probably a good estimate, 90% of the walkover scans of Area 1 are done. I just showed you the map. It's just those inaccessible areas, those temporarily inaccessible areas we haven't done yet. We have completed 100% of the towed array areas. Now, the caveat is that one location, there's a big location that's temporarily inaccessible. We are going to use the towed array system on that area once the developer moves all the stored wood and concrete and big garbage bins and stuff. So we will use the towed array. Prior to that, not knowing we were going to do those sites, we were 100% complete the towed array. The overall project, these are estimates. We're saying 90%. So think about this in practical terms for a minute. It's one thing to go out and do the work. It's another thing to come back and compile everything and put out a report that includes all of your data and summaries and all the data sheets. So that's the overall project. And so we still, after the completion of the surveys, we still need a few months to finish that report. But that report will have all the raw data available to anyone that wants it. And yeah, so there's 2 to 3 months after completion of the project. Ooh, that was the last slide. You remember. Yeah, so question time?
Yes, and we'll start first with questions from
Okay.
Stacy. So Stacy, members, do you have any questions?
On your instruments,
He's from, Cal.
I heard you mention 30 feet on one penetration. How deeply do they penetrate? And are you conducted in the entirety, or are you doing just segments of each area?
Okay. So, depending on the instrument and the material you're surveying, the depth with which you could see a gamma source varies. We like to say 6, 12 inches, depending on the material. Soil, dirt, probably closer to 12. If it's concrete, it's a lot less. It's 6 inches or 5 inches or 7 inches. So it just depends on which instrument you're using. So if you're using, this is a good question. If you're using the towed array, which is over the asphalt, you can see pretty deep because it's so sensitive, and the chambers and the crystals are so big, they can absorb so many different varied photons of different energies and interpret that. You can get a pretty deep survey of anything that might be radioactive down there.
What do you mean when you say pretty deep?
We like to say 6 to 12 inches.
Okay, that's not pretty deep.
That's right. Hey,
Well,
That's true.
remember, what we're doing is we're looking for unnecessary radiation at the surface that could hurt someone. So if we don't see it at 6 to 12 inches, even if it's deeper, it's not exposing anyone. So at least we're trying to locate a discrete source within that range. Because if you do find it, then you would dig it up and get rid of it.
But if it is deeper, it does have a propensity to slowly work its way up. Isn't that the purpose of eliminating contamination? Because if it's deep, it can work its way up to the surface.
That might be a question for someone else that could answer that. I've never heard that sources just travel up. I suppose if you got underground pressure. I suppose if you have underground pressure or water or something that are pushing.
Yes, we do.
But right now, we scanned it so that at this point, there's no radiation that we found other than those anomalies in the one deck model.
any other questions of CSC? Okay, so let me. I've got about 7 cards here for speakers. So here's the dilemma. I'm trying to find out how many of you would like to ask questions. Just questions about the presentation. If you would kindly raise your hand. Okay, have you filled in a yellow card? Okay, if you filled in a yellow card, I can do that. Okay, so let me just get the questions out of the way first, and then you'll have 2 minutes in which to ask your question. Yes, Ray?
Okay. Go
No,
ahead.
I'm not asking you to go. I'm just wondering why your hand is up.
Oh, no, you asked, remember?
Oh, okay,
Those
so
who
you
have
didn't put your
questions.
hand down.
I know.
I'll wait till
Okay.
Did you put your card up?
Do you want
Yes,
to?
ma'am, my card is in her hand.
Your name is up there already.
Okay, so I want to make sure, because we will all have this opportunity to speak. So let's start with Ahimsa Sucha. You have your 2 minutes.
Dr. Himsa Sumtai, founding chair, Radiological Subcommittee, Hunters Point Shipyard Restoration Advisory Board. I'm going to be directing a lot of my comments to the Navy. I have articles to submit, including the minutes of the May 2004 RAB presentation. Parcel A is not suitable for transfer. I also want to submit the deed of covenant that was signed in the finding of suitability for transfer that says that the grantor covenants that all remedial action necessary to protect human health and the environment with respect to any such substance remaining on the property has been taken care of, and that additional remedial actions found to be necessary are the responsibility of the Navy. The base-wide radiological work plan 2005 identifies release criteria and investigation at levels, and according to MARSOM, a systematic measurement and sampling in conjunction with surface scanning are used to obtain adequate assurance that small areas of elevated radioactivity will satisfy release criteria. I want to answer the biggest question: how did one radium dial get at the intersection of Donahue and Galvez? This is why, because the Navy did not investigate that area. The Navy only investigated 2 areas on Parcel A, IR-59, IR-59 JAI, IR-59 JAI had sandblast that the EPA now identifies as radiologically impacted. This is the intersection, and this is building 103 on Parcel B. It is radiologically impacted. These are landfills at IR-18 and IR-07. This is a map that also identifies that the Navy did not do investigations in the region of Galvez and Donahue where the radium dial was found. These objects are described as radium dials characteristically. This area under the Navy's base-wide radiological work plan needs to be excavated, and the Navy is responsible for this, and the Navy needs first and foremost to apologize to the residents of this community and the adjoining community for the impacts, the negative impacts that they've had on their lives and on their safety. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Oscar James. Oscar James.
Passes.
He passed.
Passing. Okay. Dr. Ray Tompkins.
Sir, please read out loud, and if you agree, or colleagues may, in terms of methodology that's being employed here, you can scratch off G, even though you're using the same methodology as surface scan. Because you're only looking at, please read aloud. I have bad handwriting, so that's why I typed, and I gave a copy to the board.
Okay, the CDPH did release a plan to do surface scanning only in Parcel A. The problem with their idea is that the scanners they are using only detect gamma radiation. And these scanners will be passed over the surface of modified open space areas, recording various counts per minute. This process will not be translated into the amounts of millisieverts of gamma, beta, and alpha radiation potential exposures. Alpha exposures occur through particulate ingestion or inhalation. Also, it is not known how much these open areas have been surfaced, modified, and how much cesium-137, half-life 30 years, has been washed into the deeper soil over the decades. Detection of strontium-90, plutonium-139, half-lives of 28 and 24,000 years respectively, can only be determined by doing core soil sampling under the new housing and also in the open space areas. Also, what the CDPH is using as background levels is bogus and arbitrarily setting the scanner counts per minute to be of health concern only. If the CPM is over 3 times these arbitrary background levels, therefore the planned CDPH survey of Parcel A is designed to declare Parcel A safe ASAP.
Okay. Do you agree or disagree with the fundamental science there in the paper? And this is deterioration, decay of radium dials in the different levels. Initially, when you deal with radium dials, that it breaks down one that goes into radon gas. You can read out, please. I'll shut up and let you.
Radium decay processes.
Well, I just didn't want that as something I'm making up. This is actual scientific evidence. Okay, radium dials breaks down to radon gas And as the
Mr.
board member
Tompkins, that's it.
stated, it moves through the ground and it then goes into plutonium as the final, which is what the Russians used to kill that spy in London. So the potential is that also, is that the one you use when you scan in the state of California, had the testing redone over the 23 buildings on the shipyard because the instrument ran too fast and that you had it redone? Is that the instrument that was utilized?
Mr. Tompkins, that's it. And he'll have to answer that question later. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Greg Pennington? Greg Pennington?
Yes.
Like some plantation.
I'd like to request that at the next meeting that we have, that perhaps we take the tangent that was just presented and do more of a presentation of, I'll say, the side, which was well presented, along with perhaps another scientist with a competing viewpoint based upon a lot of the information we've heard right now. And forgetting all the negative press that has been out, it would be really great to have a couple of scientists out here to talk at the same level, talk about radiation exposure, how it works over a period of time, which I think is the example we all really need to hear. This is not like Mothra and Godzilla. We're talking about people who have children here. We found the bolt, that's great. I would just like to hear more of the ilk of what's back and forth on a different presentation from, I'll use the term competing viewpoint, and wanted to see if you all would consider that and be open to that. We've done research with the person by the name of Professor Dan Hirsch. A lot of the information I found fascinating. Sure, a lot of the information I found fascinating from Professor Hirsch. It kind of contradicts a lot of what I've heard, and I'd like to hear the response back and forth from two scientists with different viewpoints, especially since we know that the bolt has been found, and we know Parcel A has not really, been reviewed. Let's go even deeper than that. I'm not even comfortable necessarily with the fact that if radiation is 15 feet below where we are and there's cement above it, that we're protected. I need to hear more personally. And I'd like to have more of a back and forth presentation and request.
Thank you very much. Sidney Martin. Sidney Martin.
I don't have a question, thanks for that.
Oh, certainly. Okay. I'm
Where do
sorry.
you go?
Pastor Bill. Mr. Pennington?
Go.
Mr. Pennington,
Reverend,
I'm sorry.
Josiah Bell wanted to speak with
I
you.
think if you have, for all of you, if you have those kinds of requests, put it down in writing and submit it to our chair, and we will take it into consideration. I want everybody to know we're not trying to hide anything. We're here as community members. We have people that live here, our aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, and kids who live in this area. So if you have that kind of dialogue that wants to be developed, then I suggest that you get together and submit a formal request for that kind of a dialogue. Thank you.
Just so you know, it has been requested via email in the past, but we can do it again in a more formal method or whatever method you want. But outside of my request verbally now, there have been email requests for that kind of meeting, and it has not come to pass. Just so you know.
Who did you send it to, sir?
Linda.
We're talking about the exchange that you and I had, Dr. Honeycutt, about having Dan Hirsch come to this meeting.
That is correct, and I'll have to talk to you offline about that because there are some mitigating circumstances why he could not present on this agenda. Okay, and so that's the information I wanted to share with you. But
Well,
that's not what your husband is requesting. He wants to hear from two competing scientists with different viewpoints.
I actually, I think that is what he's requesting. That's
Okay, so
exactly.
Hirsch is just one gentleman. In your email, you did not
Well, we've
suggest.
heard the point of view.
But
from
he
the-
said something about them being side by
Oh,
side,
yeah,
where
argue
they
with
could share, they
Right.
could share.
Wow.
That's a
Right.
totally different request from the one that you made. As Pastor Bell said, if you put that together in such a way where I can understand what you want, then certainly we will look at it and do everything within our power to make that kind of an activity come to fruition.
Okay.
Okay? Okay, Nicole Cunningham.
I'm giving my 2 minutes to Tandra Lowe. Since you-
Hi, I'm just gonna stand up here, I just wanted to
No,
ask.
go.
Go to the front.
So that she has her 2 minutes and my 2 minutes.
I just wanted to ask, when you did find the marker, why wouldn't anybody suggest to go under the ground instead of using a machine like this? And when you use the word sensitive, it just seemed like it's just sensitive. Sensitive doesn't mean 6 feet under, and I just feel like that's just a fooling word. And I'm a little wiser than that, and I live around here, and I just think you just need to explain just that sensitive. A lot of people want to know why you didn't go 6 feet under, why just the 12 inches or anything.
No, what was the rest? You had more stuff.
Oh, you want me to answer it?
Um,
So, yeah, sensitive is a health physics term we use on how sensitive the instrument is to radiation. So if I turn it on in here, you'd be hearing a lot of clicks because of nature. So we were just charged to see if there's any undue radiation currently coming up out of the ground and affecting someone. The 6 feet under would be a totally different type of survey or remediation type work. It's a whole different animal as opposed to what we're doing here. So that's a totally different animal. Yeah.
So how did we get that animal?
That's a question for other people, I think.
So what is your request? What do you want?
This doesn't get 6 feet under, and then how do we get that animal? Just to go that 6 feet under, who
So-
would we go to?
So one of the things that we've been saying is that we want to finish our survey that we've got designed and look at the data and see what it shows, and then make any decisions necessary after that. So I talked about this system, the total array system, and it takes one data point every second. It takes a really, really long time to analyze that data. So we're only a little more than halfway analyzing. So once we analyze that, and if it shows any elevated areas, then we're going to go out on spectral 1000 and count it for 30 minutes. So there could be more news on this. So we haven't finished that yet. Once we compile and collate all that information and that data, that we'll be talking about next steps.
well, you can finish up. Okay, I'll finish up with my question then. Hi, thank you. Was Parcel A ever cleaned up at all from Tetra Tech or from the Navy at all? Or is this the very first time you guys are doing any type of scanning at all?
So it's my understanding that Parcel A did go through the CERCLA process, and there's a lot of check boxes you have to go through on the supervent side of the CERCLA process. And
Can you explain a little more? What does that mean? Check
the
marks?
CERCLA yeah, there's just steps you have to go through. And I don't know, Anthony, if you want to talk about the CERCLA process a little more, but
Please.
it's a whole step process that you go through,
Mhm.
and the Navy did that. And
Parcel A went to the remedial investigation stage only at 2 sites, at 2 SI sites. That's the point I made. It did not go through the full steps. It was a no further action rod. That was
Yeah.
the riveting.
yeah, that's our understanding, that it just went to that step, and then it was released,
Oh.
and the city accepted the site.
Okay.
So
it never completed?
EPA did a survey of some old roads around here.
Mhm.
I'm not sure, the Navy's gonna have to remind me.
Yeah,
if he
so
did
why don't
anything
we
else.
have happy to answer. Derek Robinson with the Navy, I'm the Brack Environmental Coordinator for Hunters Point. Hello, I see some familiar faces out here.
Okay.
So Parcel A, what we've done and what we do in the past, and so we do at all of our CERCLA sites, is we look at activities that went on. So were there activities that radiological materials may have been used? And that's how we and we focus our investigation on those areas. So if radiological activities were used, were there, then we look for radiological in that area. Now, Parcel A, we've said this many times, and we're really talking about Parcel A up on the hill, not as much this one little teeny strip right here along the base. But the area up on the hill was always housing and or administrative. So there weren't radiological activities. So out of this one dial, and you've heard they scanned the whole top of the hill, scanned around houses. How did this one deck marker end up down here? Well, that's a good question. What we kind of are teasing out right now, this is something we're looking into very much, is that area and the location it was found is very close to the old area next to the entrance of Hunters Point, where the base activities used to happen. Now, we look for radiological activities that would have caused some sort of release to the environment that caused a lot of radiation potentially to get into the environment. But what we can't do is we can't necessarily account for if something was discarded or lost. So right now, that is our best guess, is that this item, which they maintain ships, they pull these on and off of ships all the time. There's potential that one was kept as like a keepsake and discarded and or lost in that location. These items are common. You can still buy them today on the internet. You can buy one of these. They're just that's our best guess at this point.
So I'm just trying to be clear, for all of Parcel A, whether it's this strip or up there, did the Navy or Tetra Tech or anyone do the same, what you guys are doing right now, which is the scanning and digging? Did any company thoroughly search anywhere on Parcel A to do any type of cleaning? Because what I just heard is it wasn't part of what you thought it was with radiation, so it wasn't. So can you just clarify that for me?
Yeah, we focused our efforts on areas that there were potential radiological activities.
So no for Parcel A.
So there were several different buildings. There were 3 buildings that we did do investigations of, and those were completed.
Okay, so is that Parcel A? I'm confused because I'm saying there's houses on Parcel A, right? Is that correct that there's houses?
There used to be houses.
No. I mean, you guys have there's currently new homes on Parcel A.
So prior to transfer of the property, there was some band scans that were done by EPA. The buildings that had some radiological activities, that they were fully investigated. The majority of that parcel was housing and or administrative, so there's no reason there should be anything up there.
So you guys did not?
Yeah, we wouldn't have looked where there was no.
Okay, that's just what I was trying to, so you guys did not do any, so what you guys are doing now is for the first time? No one did any scanning before or digging for Parcel A? Okay, thank you, that's just all I was looking for.
Would you answer her question too? Would you answer her question about the nature or the type of the initial question? I'm sorry.
Tandra.
Okay, excuse me, but there's a process about this questioning. So we can answer that question later. Let's go through these people.
Thank you, I'm done with my time, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, and we'll get back to that question, Mr. Pennington, okay? But let me try to get through these people in some systematic order. Elaine Brown.
I have a question or a comment, whatever. So I'm first of all, you are a scientist and you're working for what, Lennar, Cal DCH? Who do you work for?
California Department.
Are you affiliated with Lennar in any way?
No.
In no way at all. You're not affiliated in any way at all. Okay. Now you know the firm evidence of falsified soil reports that have come out. Are you saying that you're dismissing all of those reports about the falsified soil reports from Tetra Tech whistleblowers? Is that irrelevant to you?
Well,
I'm just asking, is this a yes or no?
Falsification?
I'm not speaking of falsification because I have the same question this gentleman had about your notion that radiation doesn't travel and nothing travels, and wind and water and all this stuff just sitting around in its exact same place for the last 40 and some years. So I'm just trying to understand from you, are you accepting that there were falsified reports, soil reports, that have been done by the Navy's contract? Is that right or not? You accept it or not?
That's been adjudicated, and I think at least.
No, it hasn't been fully adjudicated. It will be, but I'm asking you now, do you say that you accept there were false tests?
Yes, there were false tests.
Okay, and so now you're just doing these tests with a scanner. I'm not a scientist. I'm not going to get up here and try to pretend and say all kind of what your results are. We're gonna argue about that, and most people in here aren't able to really have an intelligent conversation with you about the scientific evidence. So it's kind of razzle dazzle. So I want to know, why are you willing, since this gentleman here said this is our best guess, you don't know where it is, but we're supposed to believe that Parcel A is more or less clean from our best guess. Parcel B could be contaminated, Parcel C could be contaminated, D, E, F, G, whatever they are, and somehow they stop at the parcel lines, and all the contamination in the other areas has not seeped some kind of way. They've magically remained in place and recognized that. So I want to know, are you willing to conduct thorough tests on all of the 500 acres of Hunters Point, because we know this stuff does move? So that's my question.
Okay, thank you very much.
So there's no answer? I asked a question. I'm not going to get an
No,
answer?
he'll respond.
Okay.
So the testing, the scanning we're doing on Parcel A, maybe this is the time to try to understand better from the community when you are talking about radiation from the site onto Parcel A. There's really two kinds of travel processes we could talk about. One is the community concerned about a bunch of discrete little sources that are sealed inside little metal casings and just thrown randomly and buried? Or is the community concerned about dust, contamination blowing onto the site, moving around because it's very windy up
We
here?
worry about all of it. All of it.
Okay, so let's talk about
Whatever
the
way it
contamination
travels,
part
it travels.
first. So the contamination part, the only source that I'm aware of here at Hunters Point was those ships back in the 40s during the surface testing out in the
The
atoll.
nuclear bomb ship.
And they got contaminated, and then they came back and they got
Sorry.
washed off. Is that not the?
No, that's not.
That's not.
Because the Manhattan Project was also conducted, and that Captain Foreman made very clear to the RAB that this was about determining what kills you quicker, uranium-235 or plutonium, and what is known as Mariners Village. And if you look at the report
Ray, you're gonna have
from
to limit
39
all of that,
to 30,
Okay.
so that he could just answer the question.
okay, that no, it is
Well, he can't lie if he
the
don't
ma-
answer the question.
it is
That's the
up
truth.
above
That's it.
Okay.
where Mariners Village is at. That was according to testimony in '98 by the laboratory workers who died from plutonium exposure. She was 78 and dying. This is a.
Ray,
Okay.
Ray.
So,
She said that she spilled it up there, and as our minister stated, that water rolls downhill. We have
Right.
springs all over the hill. It flows.
he gets the point, Ray, that's it.
It's
How do
not
you
one
know
of
what
How
they
do you
did?
know?
Because-
I'm chairing this meeting.
Okay.
So what?
Oh, right, that's right.
Show
I just-
some
And if you don't
respect.
like it, then you know.
No, I'm
what-
not
what
gonna
you-
leave, and you have to put
Okay,
me
well,
out, so
then-
stop
then
that. Don't
comply
go
with our
down that
rules.
path. That's not the path to
Okay,
go
that's
down.
it, Ray.
Let it
That's
go.
I
Did
was
you
just
get enough
educated.
explanation?
so that sounds like a third pathway.
Yes, sir.
Fission products, the discrete sources, and then plutonium that was spilled.
That was on top of the hill that came down.
Right.
Can I just please say that the
No,
scientists of the
no.
NRDL
No,
poured
Nobody don't
of
support me.
radioactive waste into
Hold
the
it, you
drain,
No.
and the
Okay,
base
sit
line
down,
drains, the storm drains, the sewer
system,
system, and the steam lines are impacted, and
Okay,
Parcel
so-
A is impacted
Okay,
by
so
virtue
you've had your
of that.
2 minutes, and that's it, please sit down. Thank you very much. All right,
Stay on the side of the knot.
now, let's move on to the next.
What, there was an answer? I didn't even hear I asked a question, you said questions, I didn't get
Did
it.
you respond to you answered some of her questions. Did you-
Hers, but then the gentleman.
No, you didn't answer, I didn't hear any answer. Are you willing to conduct a complete investigation of all the soil of the 500-some acres of Hunters Point shipyard? That's my question.
So the DTSC is the lead agency for this site, and they are overseeing the remediation at Hunters Point as well as other sites. And in terms of CDPH, we have some expertise in health physics within the department that does consulting work for DTSC. And that process is ongoing, so as a parcel is remediated and studied and the work plans come out, anything related to health physics, this unit within CDPH does review that. So it's my understanding that the DTSC methodically is going through the entire site And as parcels are remediated and reviewed, they get released, or sometimes they don't get released and they get capped, like E2. So that's my understanding.
Well, do we have any kind of written report? Are
Okay,
you
so
not
that's
willing?
the end of your questioning.
Okay, well, I know you want
Alright.
to shut down everybody that doesn't agree, but let me just,
No, I'm not shutting down
oh,
anybody.
you're shutting down.
But I want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to ask their questions. Okay, anything that is not resolved, we will come back to it at a later date. Okay? So that's the way it is. Yes, Mrs. Vincent.
Doctor, I just want to say to this gentleman, many of the people are seeing for the first time, this kind of meeting. And maybe the acronym is throwing them off, they need to state what the acronym means, so they'll know which department you're talking about.
Okay. So yeah, CDPH, California Department of Public Health is who we
Not the
work
name,
for.
not the name.
All right, so the next speaker, Linda Parker Pennington.
Thank you, Dr. Monica. So most of what I was going to ask has been said, but I just wanted to summarize because we had a meeting with the homeowners, which I think was the third.
Last one.
Yes, last Wednesday. And so I just wanted to summarize some of the outstanding questions for public record's sake of what we asked would be further tested. So we have asked that there be a swipe test of the soil, the sediment on the glass inside of our units on windowsills. They've agreed to that. We've asked, we are concerned, and I've heard this several times tonight, about the soil underneath our homes. So our home, Greg and I's home, has a garage that's down below. It sits on soil that is underneath the surface ground, street level, because the garage is down there. We're concerned that soil may be contaminated. We have no way of knowing that or not, because again, we're on Parcel A that was never tested, as Nicole has been clear about. So the other piece, so that's two. So the other piece is the foundation, the concrete over in the garage. Is it really providing a barrier against what might be down there? Okay, so we have questions about that from countervailing evidence. And then finally, when you refer to the anomalies relative to kind of a baseline standard, what is that baseline based on? You can take a piece of soil that is already contaminated and call that your baseline, because you're using soil that's already here. And then you can test against that. Your results will say, oh, it's perfectly within acceptable grounds. So we want to understand what that baseline is based on and understand it clearly so that we can trust the data, which currently there is a real trust problem. So you have to reestablish trust not only with the homeowners here, but with everybody in this community who's been living here over the decades.
You beat the clock.
Question on the standard. What's the state standard? What's the comparing soil? She asked.
So, so we took off-site readings, similar materials, wood chips, asphalt, concrete, and we established those numbers. And we are doing a survey for discrete sources. Now, when we use the Inspector 1000, we would see cesium here. So when you're talking about fission products, the stuff that was on the ships from the bombs, you get beta, alpha, and gamma products from that explosion. That stuff settles on the ships. The ships get washed off, the water dries, it gets into the dust, it's very windy, and it blows up. So we would be seeing cesium when we do those Inspector 1000s. We've done many Inspector 1000s. Every survey unit that we do, we randomly select a spot and do an Inspector 1000. And we haven't seen any cesium. If you don't have cesium, you don't have strontium, because they go together. They don't separate. When that dust blows, it's all mixed up together. So at least from the fission product side, we feel like this survey does give you some anecdotal data on the fission products. Doesn't address your pure plutonium. It doesn't address your strontium discrete source, but it does address the fission products. Now, the dust scanning, the good thing about that is that, you can wipe your windows, and then we can take it back to the laboratory, and we can look for beta and alpha components within that dust. And so at that point, once we get to that, we will have some data on loose alpha and beta sources. Contamination, let's call it contamination. You have sources, I can pick up a source, it's sealed, it's a piece of metal or aluminum or whatever, and I can throw it around like a ball, and then I've got contamination. And so those are the two different areas we're talking about. So the dusting can do alpha and beta research, but not the discrete stuff. You'd have to get on your hands and knees for decades and walk, just crawl very, very slowly for decades to do an alpha survey. And you wouldn't find anything anyway because the alpha is just going to get stopped by the dirt or the grass. It would just stop it. So it would probably be unlikely to use a survey instrument and find any alpha. Maybe could on smooth surfaces, but in the grassy areas, you probably wouldn't find it out. With a survey instrument, not laboratory analysis, but with a survey instrument.
So if you have some questions, we had about 4 questions there. You might want to talk with him offline, you know, when we finish with all the questioning, because he will be here for a while. So that's the suggestion I'm making to those of you who want even more answers to your questions. Okay, he will be available so that you can ask him questions.
Well, I think the answers to those questions should be a matter of public record for
Yes, that's
everyone.
right.
It's not an offline conversation, it's very much an on-the-record
Let's put it this
conversation.
way, he's not going to be able to answer all those questions tonight as we move through all the questions. Now, this information about what you suggested is already available. So if you send the information to us, we will make sure that we get the answers that you need, so that you can, and then we can disseminate it to you. You can disseminate it to the entire community, as we do through our website. Okay?
Just a point of clarification. In the previous answer, we mentioned that DTSC is the lead. I just want to clarify that the Navy is the lead agency for the cleanup of Hunters Point, and US EPA is the lead agency, regulatory agency, and DTSC is the lead state agency.
Acronyms need to be explained.
US EPA.
Y'all don't know what they mean?
They can't hear you.
Speak up, please.
Okay, would you stand up, and when you stand up, would you identify who
Yeah, my
you
name
are?
is Anthony Chu. I'm with the California Department of Public Health.
Did you fill out a card?
Yeah.
Like I
So-
did? Oh, you doesn't have to. Oh.
No, he's one of the experts that can share information with you.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that in the previous answer, we mentioned DTSC. DTSC stands for Department of Toxic Substances Control, and we mentioned that DTSC is the lead. Just to want to correct that, the Navy is the lead agency for the cleanup. DTSC is the state lead regulatory agency, and US EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, is the federal lead for cleanup.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Eva, present.
Yeah, from EPA.
Oh, excuse me, I just want to introduce us quickly. I am with the EPA, and we are here tonight at the federal EPA with my staff, Lily, my community liaison, and the Department of Toxic Substance Control. The state lead is their representative here as well. So, we didn't want to butt in some of the stage the answers, but we could help answer some questions if they want to defer those.
All right, that would be fine, because if you have information to share with this group, they'd love to hear it, and we would too.
I'll just answer one question, if I may. I think that you asked about the rest of the facility. So that, again, it's true.
I said the rest of the soil,
that
if you
the
pointed at me.
falsification
Were you
was-
pointing at me? I
Yeah,
said
sorry.
the rest of the soil is what I said. I didn't say a facility. So you're talking about me since I said.
Yeah, I thought your question involved.
No, my question was, are you going to test all 500 acres of the soil of the Hunters Point shipyard? Because all
Yeah,
of
that's-
this contamination does move, so
Right.
nobody can say, that much we all know, this is pretty much clear. You've had the Navy to hire not once, not twice, but 3 times, an organization that
Sure, I
falsified.
can answer that question. So,
Yes,
yeah,
but if you're going to point at me, I'm going to clarify my question.
All right, thanks. The rest of the facility is planned to be tested. So we talk about the other parcels you named off, B, C, D, all of those.
Whatever, 500 acres.
Right, so the first parcel that is going to be retested is parcel G. And there's a work plan that had been out for public comment. a lot of citizens sent comments in on what they felt should be done at Parcel G to retest it. And it's being retested again because of the degree of falsification or potential falsification that was determined by the Navy's consultant, the third party, as well as EPA and the state. So we did determine there was a high degree of potential falsification in Parcel G, so that's where we're starting. The Navy also issued some analysis of the remainder parcels in terms of their degree of falsification, and they all had enough falsification that not only the Navy, but the regulatory agencies determined that we need to put that data aside and actually retest the remainder of the facility as well. So again, Parcel G is the first area to be retested. There was a plan that the Navy sent out in August. Agencies commented on it, EPA did, the state did, a bunch of citizens commented on it as well. They're going to send out a revised plan later, actually by the end of September was the plan. Yep. And at this juncture, I mean, they're going to look at all Parcel G. So they're going to move parcel by parcel by parcel, but it's going to take some time. So the Parcel G will be sampled first. Starting, the initial testing will probably start by the end of the calendar year initially, and starting more January, February, March, probably when they really get into the meat of the new sampling.
Just a quick, I won't interrupt this meeting, just I want to know who will be doing this testing.
So the Navy we're overseeing this very closely. So they're hiring an
We being you, the APA?
the US EPA, who I'm employed by, and the California State Department of Public Health and Department of Toxics, we're observing very closely every step the Navy takes on this time, right? So we were overseeing it last time, but again, we didn't anticipate, and I haven't seen this in over 30 years of environmental work, that a company would actually go out and purposely falsify work.
But it happened.
Now, they've sent 2 people to federal prison for doing that so far. So, this time around, the Navy is, again, looking very closely to make sure they're hiring someone that's not affiliated with Tetra Tech, EC Inc. They're also
So the
hiring,
name of the company is what?
That Tetra Tech EC Inc.
Oh, I thought you were
That's the
naming the
company
new
that-
company, I'm sorry,
I'm
excuse
talking
me.
fast, I know. So the Navy is hiring an independent company to do the new retesting. They're also hiring another company, sounds strange, to oversee that company independently to make sure they're not doing something afoul. EPA will have people in the field overseeing that. The state will have, California Department of Public Health will be in the field overseeing that. We have a lot of layers of protection this time to make sure that work's done right. So Parcel G will be tested first, and that's going to tell us a lot about how much Tetra Tech actually falsified work. So stay tuned for that. The Navy will be coming, and we'll be coming back month by month here if they invite us. We're willing to come, as well as the Navy holds their own independent meetings in this room often, and look for those to update you on the testing status as that marches on. I'll let you go back to the
And the next meeting is October 3rd, right?
All right.
Just
Oh, I'm sorry.
the next meeting for when the Navy's actually going to be sharing is October 3rd?
Yeah, the next meeting is in this room
Oh,
on
okay.
October 3rd.
Okay.
Oh,
5:30.
Yes.
5:30,
Maybe.
okay.
All right, Eva, please.
Excuse me for speaking extemporaneously, but my name is Ava, and my family's been in San Francisco since before the '06 quake, and we've seen a lot of change in the city. And one side of my mother's family was racially covenanted in terms of the housing, and my father's family wasn't. And these kinds of questions aren't being asked about the Fillmore district, these questions about radiation. And when we look at the history of the racial covenants and how they were exercised against the African American community in particular, I hope that we understand that these questions that people have about the safety of their community are that we must expend every effort to make sure that the area is safe and secure. And these aren't people being noisy and obstructive. They really need to know, because there was never any restitution or apology for the federally mandated racial covenants that blanketed this entire area. And you're not having these conversations in Pacific Heights. You're not having these conversations in the Sunset or the Richmond district of San Francisco. This is very, very important. Every effort must be expended, and every voice must be heard, and every person's concerns must be heard. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ava.
Gloria Berry, please.
Hi, this issue is very serious to me. Again, I'm Gloria Berry. I was in the Navy 12 years. I was a radioman. I was on 3 ships that had nuclear weapons on them, and my ship was actually down here at the Hunters Point shipyard. I have a mysterious illness. I have all the symptoms of someone being exposed to radiation. I have bone pain. I have sores on my body, the rashes they talk about. But yet, what my question is this. Japan had an earthquake, and sailors there were exposed to radiation. They have several sailors that have illnesses they say is related to that.
And their children.
However, the Navy says it's just a coincidence.
That's right.
The scientists in Japan said, no, it's not. Our community has been affected from this radiation. So we think the sailors have been too. So when this gentleman spoke about going further than 10 inches and maybe even further than 6 feet, when we redevelop an area and build and do more construction, I'm sure construction equipment goes more than 6 feet. I'm sure plumbing goes more than 6 feet. I know just from talking to the community of a person who worked for the water department who wasn't even allowed to go underground in some areas. Why? You spoke cesium was found, but it's supposedly safe levels. Cesium explodes when it's contacted with air and water. And the only way to safely transport cesium is with mineral oil. So are you saying that the cesium levels here are safe?
I think what I said was we haven't found any cesium.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
But the whistleblower did.
I'm not aware. Oh, you're the guy on the perimeter of the site?
The guy on the perimeter.
Forgot his name.
Yeah, there's one
the one that
particular
died?
historic, or one location that was pointed out by one of the whistleblowers. That is one of the locations we're going to be sampling. I can tell you that the location he talked about has been removed down to 2 feet and new soil's been put in place. But we're still going to sample, they're going to sample under that 2 feet to make sure whatever he found or whatever he thought he found, we know if there's something there or not.
And what amount of cesium are you telling the community it's safe to be around?
Well, what we're telling the community is that cesium is naturally occurring in the environment, just like many of these things
That's
are.
not answering the question. What amount of cesium?
And there are, if you let me finish, what we're looking at is we're looking at a safe level as determined by the environmental community above what's naturally occurring. So it's a very, very low level we're talking about.
Do you know that level?
Yeah, it's in all of our documents.
You don't know it to say it right now in front of the
It's
community?
0.113 micrograms per, 0.113 picocuries per gram.
Ms. Berry. All right. Michelle Pierce, please.
So I want to thank you guys for having this meeting, first of all. I had some specific issues that I wanted to ask about. However, in your talk, you raised some things that I really feel like need to be addressed. Especially, you should come in here and talk about these things without a little more background. Number one, I keep saying this, you guys have to get away from this oxymoron of anomalous to background naturally occurring. Those two things are the opposite. So I understand what you're saying. Potassium-40 is not harmful to human health, does occur naturally, but if it is anomalous to background, it is not naturally occurring to the area. It is not naturally occurring to background. So we need to switch that language a little bit. I'm not concerned with the potassium-40. Now, the only experiments done here radiologically had to do with sandblasting a ship. No, there was an actual laboratory here. It started at the top of the hill. We have high water tables, so stuff washes down.
Come on. That's right.
They
Teach,
did
girl.
bench lab research. They did animal studies. They did wind and tide studies, and they have those monitors down at Moffett and up at the headlands to trace when the radiation reached those places. They tried to use a whole series of solvents to wash the irradiated materials from the ships. And all you have to do is go to the main public library or search the Navy's website to get the RAB notes, which actually give sworn testimony about the fact that the people who worked at that lab buried bodies on Parcel A, dumped solvents wherever they could. There was no standard. We didn't know what was healthy or not healthy, so they put stuff everywhere. And I need you to be factual and accurate about what went on here. This is why we are concerned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Have a nice and clear. Thank you.
Linda Richardson. Thank you, Dr. Honeycutt. So, we getting, I think the problem that we have, and we have Cal EPA, Cal EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, you also have the Fed, you have Department of Toxic Substance and Control, right? And you also have the California. All of you are supposed to be the experts, right? Okay, so this is what we've been doing now. We're getting from newspaper, we're getting from the Chronicle, we're getting, people are writing all over the places. We're also getting information from ordinary Joe Blow. They get information, everyone is scared. So what we need to do right now, and for all of you experts, they've given you billions of dollars.
Billions.
We are going to put everybody feet to the fire. You need to come out here because there are a lot of misinformation, a lot of misrepresentation abound. HPS is not the only Superfund site in your national register. You have bases all over the country, all over the world. So you started out, which is very brilliant, understanding radiation. Now I want to turn the table. You need to have a slide, understanding radium-226. Okay, so now, I'm not the expert, but this is what I find out about radium-226. During the 1930s and 1940s, the military, the Navy, radium-226, radioluminescent, was like the LED of that day. It glows in the dark, right? There were three kinds of radium-226. The one that was used personnel. You actually have your soldiers clipped to their helmet. Okay, this information is out there. That's why everything has to be transparent in doctoral hemshire. So you have the personnel kind, which the soldiers clipped into their helmet. Then you have the deck marker, which is again at issue here. And then you also have the bridge marker. Those were the three elements of that. So between 1930s and 1940s, you have all these radium-226. What blew my mind was that in addition, there were also domestic uses for radium-226. To date, over 100 million of radio watches. You remember some of those radio clocks?
Yep.
Back in them days, over 100 million produced of radium-226. You also have them in fishing rods. You have them in ropes. Why am I talking about this here? Well, we need understanding radiation. You also need to tell us here understanding radium-226. When my neighbors read the Chronicle and they read wherever the news media, all we are hearing is radium-226. We don't know what radium-226 is all about. The burden is on Cal DPH, Fed EPA, DTSC, all of y'all, if I can use that language there, to come out and help us to understand why we are to stop a lot of the misinformation. Let me also educate the public here. People think that the people you are hearing of, the people in Baby Hunters Point are more sophisticated. For the last 30 years, we have actually done a toxic profile of Baby Hunters Point.
Entire Baby Hunters Point was a dumping ground for the city and county of San Francisco. We have 2 Superfund sites belonging to the state. Yes, ma'am, I'm trying to because we need to put it out there. Help us to obtain the toxic profile of Baby Hunters Point, and you will know that the people in this community have been very active for the last 30 years trying to clean up the environment, so all these people that are not coming down because it's now me. It's not about you or your property. It's about the people that live in the Bayview, working together to clean up the Bayview. That's the approaches we've been having for 30 years. So people need to understand that. Could you get us the next time any one of you agencies to get the toxic profile of Baby Hunters Point, which we put together? And it needs to be part of this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brenda,
Hi, I'm Brenda. My question is more after, because it's really pretty obvious that we're going to find radiation and contamination underneath all these buildings that have been built. What is the plan going forward to what's going to happen to these buildings and these homes that are, either they were from a long time before or the new ones that are being built in the so-called pure Parcel A?
Come on, come on.
Are you referring to the buildings in other parcels?
No. She said
I said Parcel A.
Parcel A for God's
So
sake.
the buildings of Parcel A?
Homes.
Yes, homes,
Oh, okay.
homes.
We get you.
So from what we
Get it,
understand,
get it.
what happened was the site was excavated, new soils were brought in, new hardscaping, streets, sidewalks, and the houses were built on top of that.
Okay, well, I'm suggesting that now that you're going to do deeper testing on these soils that were put in so these houses could be built, are going to reveal that there's something wrong and they're not clean. And so I want to know what the plan is should it be found out, which is very unlikely considering everything that anyone has been saying here. Then what?
Sorry,
How do you
sounds
manage?
like- Are you referring to sampling underneath buildings or?
I'm wondering not about how you're going to sample, what you're going to find with whatever sampling you do, presuming that you will do it thoroughly and deep. Underneath these homes that are already built, what are you going to do once you find that? How is it going to be cleaned up?
That is a question that, once we complete our surveys and look at the data and see what we found, then discussions could start on that.
Oh, I think they should be coinciding.
That's right.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Beebe.
Thank you.
All right, and Great Conference on the
Thank you, Dr. Honeycutt, for calling me back. Gentlemen, couple and ladies, leave your other colleagues. When you're talking about surface scanning, when I talked to the Navy's independent contractor, is it Dr. Higgins? Higgins, is that her name, from Oregon?
Dr. Higgins.
Higley, thank you. The only proper way, if we're talking about, residents have been talking about, is do core samples. Surface scanning, as you said, only covers 6 and it only covers 2. A gamma, correct? And the other 2 are not detected. And the only true way is to go down to the core. And as some of the residents and our pastor stated, that it moves. Earth is still alive, it's not decaying, and radiation moves. Then the fault, and you need to go back to the RAB testimony in '98, it was over at the police station on Wilson, where you had the laboratory technician. They were all white because black folks couldn't work there.
Come on.
And the black, one of the few surviving black men from the shipyard, because most of them died by the age of 42, carried the radiated animals from over there in G, where you're talking about, and carried it over to E2. And that he also stated that there are caverns underneath the hill where they stored, and that they also brought in bones from Hiroshima and Nagasaki after the war. The radiological historical study that you looked at from the Navy does not cover the Manhattan Project. It starts at 46 on to the hydrogen bomb testing, not prior. When we were at the old restaurant Dago Mary's, and I asked about the 4 nuclear accelerators that were down at the bottom of Old Navy Road, and because of what she talked about, discriminatory force living patterns, there were 12 families that had cancer. It wasn't by accident. I asked for the radius for electromagnetic field and water-produced radiation. These are things that you need to look at, please, in terms of historical land uses and the use of property, because people who are living over there at Mariners Village, they cut off the top and they used to save money. This is under HUD regulation before CERCLA, and they put the homes on top of the old Navy foundation, which she said they spilled and they poured the nuclear waste down the drains. Dr. Hemsher also stated. These are issues that are currently affecting residents, and the radiation goes downhill. It doesn't, and there are also springs all over the hill, because Morgan Heights filed, the homeowners filed a lawsuit because they didn't put a plastic barrier around the foundation, and it rotted out the wood, and also they had to cover it because of serpentine rock, because they were cutting measures. Please don't cut measures, and will you please split the samples? Trust nobody.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Why are you asking them?
Split the samples for the
All right,
team.
thank you.
Excuse me.
How
Is
you
there
gonna
anyone
ask them to
else
do
who
what we need to do?
has not had an opportunity to ask a question? Kindly, they'll come up to the front and fill in a yellow card. I see no hands going up. So we want to thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you, audience, for your sage questions. And that completes the CDPH presentation. All right, so we move on to the next item on the agenda, public comment on non-agenda items.